Mm.
There you go. Thank you. You're awesome.
No problem.
On.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're ready? All right. Um, Bubba Herrick is an author, speaker, mental performance coach, and a chief of staff at Rooftop Leadership, whose life changed forever at 19, where he flatlined on an operating table during a routine surgery. A former Division I baseball pitcher turned storyteller and coach, Bubba's work bridges science and spirit, teaches athletes and entrepreneurs how to access flow state, the highest expression of human performance. His mission is simple: to help people perform, create, and live fully alive. His book, Becoming Ready to Die: The Fight for My Soul and How to Reclaim Yours, is available at Amazon. Welcome, Bubba. The floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for being here, everybody. So, like Cynthia said, my story starts in 2019, where I was a Division One baseball player, on track to what I thought to be a professional career in baseball. I was kind of derailed by an injury though my freshman season, so that's where my story starts. The day before my surgery, I had an elbow injury, and I was going in for surgery on it. The day before my surgery, I met with this nurse, and she was asking me all these questions to ensure that I could be operated on. And she got to the last question of her sheet, and it was, "Are you allergic to anything that might complicate the surgery?" And when she asked me that question, for whatever reason, I had never had surgery before. I had this pit in my stomach. I was like, man, there's just something off about this surgery. I'm not sure what it is, but I just didn't have a great feeling about it going in. The next day comes, and I'm in this pre-operation holding room where I'm hooked up to my IV, and I've got this machine with my heartbeat on it next to me. And my surgeon comes in. My mom is to my left, and he says, "Bubba, here's how this is going to work." He says, "We're going to put the anesthesia through your IV. And by the time we do that and wheel you to the operating room, which is just on the same floor," he said, "you're going to be unconscious and under anesthesia. You're not going to feel a thing. The surgery is going to last 1 hour. We're going to send you back home to Tampa. In 1 year, you're going to be back on the mound playing baseball. In 2 years, you're going to be an All American. And in 3 years, you're going to be a draft pick." And I look to my mom, who's to my left, after he says that. And of course, like all moms, my mom was very nervous for the surgery. I say, "Mom, didn't you hear that? Like, I'm going to be an All American." He said, "I love you. I'll see you in an hour. The surgery's only going to last an hour." She says, "I love you too, baby. I'll see you soon." So the doctor does exactly what he said. He puts the anesthesia through my IV, and he wheels me to the operating room just like he said. But there was one problem. When I got to the operating room, I was still awake. But it was kind of like that feeling where you know that something is off, but you don't exactly know what it is. And I'm in this operating room now, and my eyes are closed, and I'm like kind of dozing off, kind of not. And it was that sensation where you can hear and feel everything happening around you. Even though my eyes were closed, I could feel the team of doctors moving around and shuffling tools and things like that. And they're confirming with one another as I'm lying there that they're ready to operate on me. And I'm getting super, super nervous. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like either this anesthesia is going to hit or this surgery is really going to hurt. And as soon as they're getting ready to cut into me, the whole energy in the room shifts, and it was visceral. You could feel it. And the machine that had my heartbeat on it, it started to speed up, which confirmed that something was wrong here. Something was seriously wrong. And the next thing I remember was, all of a sudden I was just floating above my body. And it was almost as if I was on the second story of a proverbial house with a really, really thick glass panel as the floor. And I was looking down at the first story where my body had turned like a bruise like kind of purple, um, a lifeless blue, and then this corpse like brownish white. And I watched from the second story of this proverbial house as my heart stopped on the operating table from an allergic reaction to the anesthesia. And as soon as that happened, I was shuttled into this life review, which for those watching who might not know what a life review is, how I experienced it was it was almost as if the movie of my life was playing before my eyes, but it was like 360 degrees, and I was not only watching this movie, but I was also in the movie. And what was interesting was I wasn't just in the movie playing my own character, I was also able to experience my life from other people's perspectives as well. And there were many, many memories that I got to see in my life review, but a few stood out that really stuck with me. The first being, I remember being a kid, um, 11 years old. My parents had just divorced, and my dad had cheated on my mom in the divorce. We were living separately, and my mom and I and my brother lived in our place, and my dad had his own place with his new family. Well, one day my dad was picking me up from my mom's house, and he told me to wait in the car while he went and spoke to my mom. Um, and he told me 5 minutes, I'll be back. And I was sitting in this car, and 5 minutes passed, 10 minutes passed, 15 minutes passed, and I was like, all right, what's going on? So I turned the car off, I ran upstairs, and I walked in on my dad imposing his will upon my mom. And in this moment, I'm watching this life review unfold, and I'm watching as an 11-year-old kid, I watched my dad impose his will upon my mom. And what do I do? Well, I ran. I didn't do anything in that moment as a kid, and I ran away. Another memory that flashed before my eyes in the life review that stood out was after I ran and left my mom to be, taken by my father in some way. I had a lot of pent up emotions about that, and guilt and shame and just this cowardice feeling. But my family was going through a lot at the time, so I didn't really have anywhere for that to go. So that was until my friend, on his 11-year-old birthday party, he got this brand new iPad, and he was showing me all these things that iPads could do, and he exposed me to pornography in that moment. And pornography became my drug of choice, if you will, to deal with these heavy emotions that I was carrying from feeling like I just wasn't enough to be there for my mom and to step up as a man, even though I was only 11 years old. And eventually, this man came into our lives. His name was Mike, and he was kind of like the saving grace of our family. He and my mom actually ended up marrying each other. And another memory that flashed before my eyes after I saw this other memory with the pornography scene was Mike and I were playing basketball at my aunt's house, and there was this. My aunt's house was kind of like a redneck oasis. I'm from Florida, so in the South we use that term redneck, and it was this redneck oasis with these beautiful big oak trees and this cool basketball court in the middle of it all, and there's a pool and like an outhouse and everything. And I never played basketball as a kid, but I was always super fascinated with basketball. And Mike did play basketball, and he was in this life review scene. He was playing basketball with me, and he was teaching me how to play, and it was just this the first time in my life where I really felt connected to a father figure of sorts. And I got to watch this play out in my life review as well. But at the end of my life review, after seeing all of these scenes, there's many, many more scenes that I can share. But after seeing all of these scenes, for whatever reason, I just felt this really, really strong feeling of regret as my life review closed. Another scene that I'll share just for the sake of emphasizing this feeling of regret was my grandpa was a Vietnam veteran growing up, and he'd never spoken about the war. He had never spoken about what he'd gone through. He had really, really bad after effects from the war in terms of PTSD and just things that he carried. And there was this one time when I was about 15 years old, where my grandpa and I were sitting in these reclining chairs, and there was this big divider between us. And I was reclined all the way back, and my grandpa was sitting up, and he was looking out into the middle distance, sharing for the first time that I'd ever heard from him this story of the war. And you could tell that he was in the war again, like he was back in Vietnam while he was sharing this with me. And as much as I wanted to be there holding space for him, I was in some sense until I got a message on my phone and I got a Snapchat notification. And while my grandpa is recalling this story, I'm watching in my life review as he's opening himself up to me, and I'm scrolling on my phone responding to my friends on Snapchat. And that was the last time I ever saw my grandpa. And at the end of my life review, I just felt this really, really strong feeling of regret because I had seen all of these things that I wish I acted differently. You know, I wish I had them back to be able to make the right decision. And you know, I didn't grow up with a faith in God or anything. In fact, I grew up super, super poor. We usually mocked God in my house because it was like, well, if God is real, why are we so poor? Why are we struggling so bad? You know, we were just kind of that philosophy at the time. And after my life review, though, I, I felt myself longing for God to be real, and I found myself calling out for God. I said, God, you know, I just had this life review. I just saw all these things that I wish I could change. Give me this second chance because I know what to do now. You know, I know what to do. I know how to do it. And obviously, I didn't get a response or anything like that. And I knew in that moment that though I longed for this second chance, there was no time to fix any of it. You know, I didn't have a heartbeat. So eventually, I just surrendered and I was like, well, I can't get it back. So I surrender. God, if you're real, please take me to wherever you're supposed to take me, you know? And as soon as I did that, as soon as I surrendered, I was shuttled into this place that it's really hard to describe, but it was the most beautiful, beautiful place I'd ever been to. And this place was, for lack of a better term, it was heaven. It was almost as if I was looking at the outside world from the perspective of the inside of a really, really crystally diamond. There were these refracted combinations of light that kind of like bounced off of one another. And there was this feeling of unconditional love greater than I could describe in human terms. And in time wasn't real in this place. In fact, it almost felt like time and I were the same thing in some ways. And I didn't have a body and I didn't have a mind. And, um, you know, I couldn't really think thoughts, but if I could at the time, it would have said something like, this is my home. You know, it truly felt like home. And something else to point out about this place was I was dead technically, but in this place I felt more alive than I'd ever felt. So I'm in this heavenly realm, and suddenly this strange figure appears, and the figure actually turned out to be my stepdad Mike, the guy that I shared the basketball story with earlier on. He ended up passing away when I was 18 years old, which was about a year before my near death experience. And he and I in this heavenly realm, we start playing basketball. We start repeating this same basketball game that we shared, that I had just seen in my life review. And no words were exchanged because we didn't have to communicate verbally. It was almost as if we just telepathically knew what each other were thinking, feeling, etc. After the basketball game, which was full of loving and competition, but like a really fun energy, you know, high spirited game. Um, Mike's tone shifted and it went from this loving competitive energy, you know, to he almost became more fatherly and stern in a way. And he shared with me, he said, all right, Bubba, essentially, let's cut the crap, is what he said. He was like, let's cut the crap. Like, let's get down to business, you know? And he said, I know how desperately you wanted that second chance after your life review. And that's why you're here right now with me, is because I'm going to give you that second chance. But if I give you this second chance, you have a responsibility to live out your great purpose. That's what he told me. And he says, the next time you die, you need to be ready for it. And he gave me the option. He said, you can enter your body again, or you can stay here with me. But paradoxically, it just didn't feel like I had much of a choice. You know, like he gave me an option, but I just didn't have a choice. I knew what I had to do. So reluctantly, I accepted his offer. I said, "All right, well, I know what I need to do now. I'm gonna return to my body and go live out this great purpose." And he wouldn't tell me what the great purpose was. He wouldn't. I was like, "What is the purpose? Like, what do you mean I have a great purpose?" And he just wouldn't tell me. He says, "You have to go find out what it is." So Mike disappears, and I watch as the from the second floor that I'm back on the second floor of the house, and I watch as the doctors shoot me with the shot that saved my life. And I woke up, and there was just one thing on my mind, and it was, I have to go find this purpose. I have to go find this purpose. As soon as I got back to everyday life, though, this near death experience, it just became like a in my head, it just became like this anesthesia induced dream. I had a really hard time accepting that that had actually happened to me. So I pretty much just shut it out. I didn't tell anybody. I just put it to the side. In fact, I told my mom as soon as I woke up from this near death experience, and I shared. I said, "Mom, like I saw Mike, and I had this crazy experience. Like you got to believe me." And and she shut it down. She was like, "No, you didn't. Like whatever, just because we just didn't think that way at the time." So what I ended up doing was I returned to baseball. I eventually got my surgery, and I just said, well, if I do have a great purpose, like if that was true, then it just must mean I need to go be the best baseball player that I can be. So I trained really, really, really hard to eventually come back from the injury that I was suffering from, but it felt like I was taking a square peg and trying to shove it into a round hole. I didn't feel the same competitive fire that I used to. And I think the reason for that, looking back on it now, was just because I was driven a lot by my ego in the past, for whatever reason that just didn't work anymore. So I shut my career down and I retired from baseball. And I was like, well, baseball is not the purpose. I got to go find out what it is. So eventually I was given a journal by my stepmom because I was really, really struggling after I lost baseball because I just didn't know who I was anymore, and it took me a few years to it took me a long time to write in the journal, but eventually I did write in the journal. And when I did, I started finding new things out about myself that I didn't know before. And just naturally through the process of writing in this journal, my near death experience, it like came back up to the surface, and I started reflecting on it, and I was like, man, that was crazy that, one second you're here and the next you're gone. And why did I get this second chance? Like, what am I here for? Um, and I knew that I had to tell my story. I knew that through the process of telling my story, I would eventually find this quote purpose that I was sent back to live out. So that's what I did. I started writing every day for years about this experience. And I was trying to write a book at the time, but it was really just not coming out right. Every time I got to the end of the book that I was writing about, I would get to the purpose part. I would get to where Mike told me I had a great purpose, and I would get to the whole resolution of the story, but I just couldn't finish it because it was unresolved within me. And I was like, man, I've been dealing for this was about 5 years after my near death experience now. So I've jumped ahead a little bit in time. But I was like, man, I've got to tell this story. But before I can tell this story, I really have to resolve it within myself. And then I thought to myself, well, actually, before I thought this to myself, I was working a pressure washing job at the time. And I never really looked into near death experiences. I knew about them kind of, but I never really looked into them. And one day after my pressure washing job, I was on YouTube and I came across this interview of a comedian. His name is Theo Vaughn. I'm sure some of you guys have heard of him. And he was interviewing near death experience researcher Dr. Jeffrey Long. And I had watched this interview and it just opened my mind so much to, oh my gosh, this is a body of work. People have had these. I'm not alone in this experience. But it was really, really challenging for me to make peace with this experience. I think partially because I was so young. But also too, it just, I don't know. I think re-entering my body and trying to integrate the lessons that I'd learned from this experience was just really tough for me. And I think that was part of the reason I couldn't finish the book. So I thought to myself, I was like, man, I've got to meet these people. Like I have to meet these people. But I was working the pressure washing job and I was just trying to scrape by. So I was like, how can I meet these people while also, paying the bills and things like that. And then I found that there was a conference where these people actually gathered to meet, and it was called the IANS conference. And I'd never been. I didn't even know what IANS was at the time. IANS, for those who don't know, by the way, it stands for International Association for Near-Death Studies. Um, and they had a conference coming up. And after I watched this interview, I was like, man, I have got to get to this conference. But if I'm going to get to the conference, I can't afford my rent. I mean, I can't afford to pay my bills and also pay for the hotel and all that stuff at this conference. So my best friend Dylan, he encouraged me. He said, "Well, how important is it to you to find this purpose of yours?" And I was like, "Man, it's everything. I have to find this purpose. It's the only way I can I can move forward." And he told me, he said, "Well, we have to get you to that conference, but the only way that we're going to be able to do that is if you move into your car." And I was like, no, what are you talking about? I'm not moving into my car. That's ridiculous. Um, but he kept egging me on. He kept saying, you got a second chance at life. You have to live into this. So what we ended up doing was we built a bed in my car and we put a fridge in there and we did the whole thing. And I drove out to the conference where I was able to finally meet people like me, who had had these experiences and who could give me just guidance and insight on how to move forward from these experiences. And the conference changed my life just because I'd felt seen. I'd felt like I finally was able to close that, to resolve that experience within myself. And funny enough, after I returned from the conference, it was very easy to finish my book, and it was very easy to tell my story. And now that's what I do. Is I'm an author, I'm a speaker, I'm a coach, and I help. I kind of serve alongside the near death experience community as well, just to help with integration because I really had a tough time with it. Um, and the purpose, it's so funny. Like I spent 7 years after my near death experience looking for this great purpose that I was sent back to live out. And, the more that I think about what that purpose is, in some ways, maybe it manifests itself through my writing or speaking or coaching. But at the root of all of it, what I found was that the purpose was simply just to be myself, my most truest and authentic and embodied version of myself that I can be. And since finding that out, it's taken a lot of pressure off of myself in trying to show up a certain way, and it's helped me resolve a lot within myself. That led to me dying full of that feeling of regret, so since that experience, I've also rekindled a lot of relationships with my family. I've forgiven myself for a lot of things for that day where I could have helped with my family but I didn't. I've really, really done as best I could to just try and be the best person that I can be after this and spread as much love as possible because I mean there's so many takeaways from my near death experience, but I think one of the biggest is you just never know when your time's going to be. I went in for surgery that day and I told my mom, I said, I love you. I'll see you in an hour, and 15 minutes later I was dead. And I didn't expect that, and neither did she. So I think the through line of it all is what I'm doing now to ensure that the next time I die, I'm ready for it. Is just treating every moment like it's my last, and that's cliche, but it's the truth.
Hold
I'm
on.
all good, Cynthia. That's the
Okay,
that's
okay. I was trying to
the,
unmute.
I'm like,
Okay, I
oh
wanted
my
to
gosh.
I want to give you a little pause to make sure that that was the end of it.